Hello, investors. This is Todd Thomas, Associate Portfolio Manager with Revere Asset Management. Today is Sunday, October 12th. The time is 9:46 a.m. Coming to you from Olean, New York, to bring you the Revere Roundup weekend walkthrough. A bit of a change this past week in the trend gauge. Still have the four green up arrows. However, we've gotten some cautionary arrows on the market leaders as well as the short-term 21-day moving average and the 50-day moving average. Obviously, Friday was a pretty abrupt sell-off on Trump's announcements of tariffs, and a lot of the leaders broke through the 21-day moving average, so that could be downgraded to a neutral or protect mode in the upcoming week, depending on how the upcoming week shakes out. Also, the RSP and the mid caps broad market definitely broke hard through the 21-day moving averages as well as through the 50-day moving averages on a couple of these. So we'll go through all these charts and see what happened this past week. Overall, we were at record highs into Thursday. However, we ended the week on a pretty severe tumble. Uh, Overall on the week, the Big Eight, which is the Mag 7 plus Netflix, was down 1.54%. The Revere Growth 8 Composite was down 2.77%. The S&P 500 was down 2.43%. You can see the equal weight S&P 500 was down 3.21%. NASDAQ 100 triple Qs down 2.27%, and the NASDAQ 100 equal weight down 2.95%. Dow Jones Industrial down 2.73%. We can see the mid caps were down 3.86%, being the worst of all the indexes we follow. The Russell 2000 was down 3.29%. A 60/40 portfolio was down approximately 1.5%. GROTECTION, our flagship portfolio, was down 1.73%, and TurboTection down 2.5%. Let's get into what happened last week. Well, Trump canceled his future meeting with President Xi of China and announces massive tariffs after China bans rare earth sales. Then Trump, after the close, announced 100% tariffs on China, as well as software export controls. Now, today, China's Commerce Ministry clarified that rare earth export controls do not amount to an export ban. There's going to be eligible applications which will continue to receive licenses. However, ultimately, China said they do not want the end products to go into weapons of mass destruction. On Friday after the close, we saw the largest crypto liquidation event in history, which was 10 times larger than past events. Approximately 19 billion in leveraged positions were liquidated, with CoinGlass reporting that more than 1.6 million traders were completely liquidated. So a huge flush, and there was a lot of high leverage going on in crypto, and a lot of people lost everything. NVIDIA's Hong said demand for AI chips is substantially higher than it was 6 months ago in her week, causing NVIDIA to break out to new highs. The U.S. government cleared NVIDIA to sell several billion of its AI chips to the United Arab Emirates, and that also helped send NVIDIA to new highs. OpenAI announced a multi-year strategic partnership with Advanced Micro Devices for 6 gigawatts of AI processors over several years, and AMD grants warrants for up to 160 million shares of AMD. So a lot going on with AMD this week as it gapped open on Monday to a new all-time high. Tesla also announced a lower-priced, watered-down version of the Model Y and Model 3 as the tax credits expired in September. AppLovin plunges on an SEC investigation, and Race plummets after cutting forecasts and cuts EV forecasts. So Race was holding up well, and the wealthy were assumed to be in pretty good shape here. So this potentially sent some eyebrows across the spending appetite for the wealthy. Overall, a few interesting slides that I came across this week. Thanks to Connor Bates from our team for posting a lot of content, and I picked it off of his X handle for several of these charts. Basically, Polymarkets is only showing a 25% chance that Trump will follow through on 100% tariffs on China. we know that Trump uses these tariffs as a negotiating tool, although he has placed tariffs on all these countries. This is most likely a negotiation tactic to get China to open up the rare earth metals to our providers. Also, going through some interesting charts on crypto this week. This was the after hours market collapse in both Bitcoin and Ethereum. We can see that this is a 5-day or 6-day chart. And you can see in the aftermarket what they did. Connor posts that Bitcoin intraday correction was 15%. Ethereum was 15% plus. XRP plunged 42%. And then Ted also posted the percentage drop after hours in several of these cryptos. So very nasty action on the Trump announcement. Also wanted to bring up an interesting chart. We were going into a pretty long streak without a pullback. And in this particular case, this shows the instances in the past where there was no 3% pullback, and our current length is 119 days without a 3% pullback. So this is the longest streak on record, and then we're getting this pullback on Friday. CNN fear and greed dropped all the way to 29 in the fear zone. Keep in mind at the April lows, we got down to 4 into the extreme fear area. So we're definitely seeing volatility pick up. For the upcoming week, we have some earnings starting, and financials will lead off the earnings season with BlackRock, Citigroup on Tuesday. Then we have some consumer names like Domino's Pizza, ASM Lithography, and the semiconductor equipment area will be reporting on Wednesday, as well as some retail stocks and insurance stocks here. Thursday, Taiwan Semiconductor will lead off with the health of the AI chip market, as well as the chip market at large, Interactive Brokers and Travelers, M&T Bank, and on Friday, some more banking and financial stocks. On the weekly winners and losers, CleanSpark was up 21%, some biotechs, Stoke Therapeutics up 18%, Rocket Lab, which we previewed last weekend on the review of having an excellent setup, was up 14%, and ANET, Veritiv, Tempus AI, Celestica had a rebound on the downside, some minor downside in some of the semiconductors. Robinhood down 6.5%. SITM, another semiconductor company, down 10%. Rambus and AppLovin on the SEC investigation down 16%. I did miss, let's see, I need to report on the economic news coming up this next week. So I'm going to pull up my briefing.com calendars here. Stand by 1 second. Drag this in. A lot of these numbers are not going to be coming out because of the government data. These are the numbers that are expected to come out, but obviously the PPI and these government numbers are not going to come out. Philly Fed, housing index, housing starts and building permits. So industrial production and capacity utilization coming out, supposed to be coming out next week. So again, with the government shut down, a lot of these numbers do not come out, and we are still going through this period now. All right, now let's get into the index charts for the week. And the S&P dropped 2.43%, closing basically right on the 10-week moving average here. So this is the first test really of the 50-day coming up here too. Again, we had an intraday test here back on September 2nd. So really, since this April bottom and follow through and then regaining the 50-day moving average, we've had some intraday blips, but this is the closest that we've seen. And again, the 10-week, we've gotten some interweek hits of that 10-week, but really a close on the 10-week. So Monday will be an interesting day. We could see a gap up if some of this rhetoric calms down, and that is potentially might be the case. So we'll see if we can hold this critical area of that 10-week moving average, but down 2.43% on the week. Equal weights after looking pretty good last week, down 3.2% on the S&P equal weight. And we cracked right through that 50-day moving average. And again, the reason for the yellow sub arrows and potentially the downgrade of the GROTECTION gauge. Going to the Qs, right on that 10-week moving average. And looking at the daily chart here, still above the 50-day moving average. We did test that 50-day moving average back on September 2nd. But again, that's a pretty nasty close here, and definitely the weakest close we've seen in a long time. Q equal weights down 2.9, not much to say there. Dow Jones closing right around that 10-week moving average, again down 2.7% on the week, and right on the 50-day moving average, which this index did have that August 1st bounce off that 50-day moving average. So again, the 50-day moving averages on several of these indexes are right there. Mid caps broke below the 10-week and are now sitting on the 40-week moving average, down 3.8. Definitely the worst performing index here, which never was able to get back up to these old highs from last fall, and really struggled, really even staying above the area from January, February. And that's a really nasty break in the mid caps, which we were hoping to see some broadening participation there, but it never developed. Russell, which has been doing fairly well, still above that 10-week moving average. I guess you could say this potentially could be either a double top, even though it broke above that, or just a giant potential cup with handle and development here, which would be more ideal. But definitely slightly above the 50-day moving average still, and has the potential to handle out here. So we'll see how this develops. But again, I think we were extremely extended here, and this is probably a good thing for this to potentially correct a little further, develop and set up for a year-end rally. So this definitely takes a lot of the speculation out of the market, which we have been seeing. VIX up pretty big this week, 30%, closed above 20, 21.66. So big spike on Friday. And every time we've gotten up into this area outside of April, market has regained its footing. So that's a pretty big spike. And we'll watch to see whether volatility picks up and stays elevated, or whether we back down and Friday was it for the sell-off. US dollar was also up 1.16% after it regained the 50-day moving average. Got close to 100, but not quite back to these July levels. But definitely the dollar starting to trend higher here potentially. Gold still up another 3.2% as a flight to safety on Friday. Gold miners did back off, however, which is often you'll see once you get a broader sell-off in the stock market, even the gold stocks will start selling off. And we saw a 1.69% drop there, and extremely extended after several up weeks going into this past week. So that's the first down week in several weeks. Silver, however, definitely got the relative strength of the metals, up 4.39%, closing in again on those 2011 highs, but still off those 2011 highs. So we'll see if silver can continue to lead here, but definitely huge volume this week. Biggest volume that's traded in several years on the weekly. So we'll continue to monitor silver, but it's looking pretty strong. Bitcoin backing off from those all-time highs, down 5%, and obviously further selling in the aftermarkets. A little bit of a rebound from Friday, though. And again, I showed you those charts on slides. Those were real time through this morning. Vanguard total bond market was up slightly, meaning yields were down. And TLT, 20-year bond price proxy, up 1.39%. The 30-year Treasury yields dropped by about 8 basis points. That was at 4.634, and More notable, the 10-year bond yields are at 4.05. So those dropped about 6.8 basis points for the week and closing back in on that 4% level. So definitely a flight to safety there. Mags down 2.5%, going through the Mag 7. Apple down about 4.9%, backing off of the highs of this big base it's been in. Definitely a big, long 197-day base. Sold off pretty hard on Friday. Amazon, not much to say on these Mag 7s. Microsoft still in a consolidation. Meta, actually, let's go back to Meta, as that was breaking below the 50-day moving average. Held those lows from last Friday and closed weak on Friday, but definitely closed off the bottom of this 13% flat base. So just really consolidations here. NVIDIA broke out to new all-time highs Thursday, backed off, closed right at the 80 MA on Friday, down 4.89%, which actually wasn't bad compared to other stocks. Google still backing off from those all-time highs, and Netflix consolidating. Tesla off about 3.8% on the week and broke the 8-day moving, 21-day moving average here, but still holding this gap from back here. So we'll be watching that for potentially a pullback buy still. And that is it for the inter-asset correlation. Let's take a quick look at the industry ETFs for the week, sorted by the biggest gainers. Again, silver, gold, and uranium were up. Uranium up 0.7% on the URA. And going down to the biggest losers, China, obviously the biggest loser on the week. K-Web down 9.92%. And this was looking pretty good, but that cracked right through the 50-day moving average, going to the SOX, which was the second worst index on the week, or SMH. Pretty big volume on the week and down about 3.37%. However, cousin ETF SOXX, big volume on Friday, down 6.27%. You can see this is the biggest volume. This is traded going back in quite some time. Biggest volume of the year on the downside after it tried to break out of this big base, down 2.8% on that SOXX. OIH down pretty substantially, 5%. Let's just go through the, starting with the banking index, down 5.14%. Robots, oil and gas, obviously weak. Another China, and solars were a little bit weak. And that's it for the ETFs. Now let's go to the main watch list. Trimmed it down quite a bit as several stocks are below the 21-day and the 50-day. Once again, sorted by biggest gainers on the week. AMD with a beautiful week, up 30.5%. If you recall last week, I took a position for Toddzilla on Thursday on this. Was down about 2.25% through Friday. And last week, threw a little shade at it, saying, in typical squirrely AMD fashion, it broke that 50-day moving average, but woke up on Monday morning to a beautiful surprise with that position as, again, signed a nice deal and gapped open pretty substantially here and closed mid-bar on the week, but was making new highs through Thursday. Still holding this position, and ultimately, I'll probably use a break of 200 for a stop loss on this, so we'll see how that develops. Applied Digital with a huge price target upgrade, and earnings was up 28% this week. I can't remember which firm, but they put a huge price target upgrade on this, and this looks pretty nice, although it did reverse well off its intraday highs on Friday, but nonetheless a green Friday on earnings. U.S. rare earth, obviously these rare earths were big winners on the China news this week. This was up 25%. Quadruple U, another uranium and rare earth play, up 23% this week. ASTS Space Mobile was up huge, up 21% this week. herein, which has been in an absolute tear, up another 18% this week, but a nasty bearish engulfing pattern on big volume on Friday, as this one uh, probably needs a rest and a massive base, potentially a big pullback to the 21-day. Don't forget, the risk is always to the 50-day, but the first stop is the 21-day here, and that is extremely extended above the 21-day moving average, up 24% and up 278% above the 200-day. So that's getting into nosebleed territory. Oklo up 15%, again, very extended, but doing quite well. Figma, this is a new IPO that is of high interest. This, after its failure and drop from its IPO launch, broke above the 21-day moving average and closed right on it for the week. So this is the name of interest in the AI area. Rocket Labs, talked about this really nice day on Friday of last week as it broke through, followed through nicely, but a bearish engulfing pattern again on Friday. TeraWulf, another data center play, up 13% on the week. EOSC in the battery area up 9%. Quantum stocks, again, continued their massive run. And again, this is potentially a sign of speculation, as these companies are far from being profitable, but nonetheless doing quite well. MP Materials, which is in all of our portfolios, had a 9.57% week, and definitely helped our portfolios as it did break out to new highs on Friday, but backed off. But relative strength is making new highs, and definitely continuing to ride it, and hopefully continue to see this name break out. CRISPR Therapeutics, several biotechs look fantastic. This was up 7.8% here and broke above these old highs from September. Backed off somewhat, but still holding that 80 MA. And ever since it broke out of this cup with handle base, it's been riding that 80 MA, which is definitely a sign of strength. Next tracker, Solars, this was up 7.3% on the week. This has been the leading stock in Solars. Made new high on Friday, backed off, but still looking decent. Dell, after a 20% profit taking zone hit, still was up 6.9% and off the all-time highs from 2024 still. Arista had a decent week, up 5.91% in the networking hardware area, backed off on Friday, another bearish engulfing pattern, as we saw several of those on Friday. Centrus Energy, a TurboTection holding, was up another 5.89% on the week. Extremely extended, but they're just riding a trailer in this. Another bearish engulfing pattern there, but still on the 80 MA. Veritiv tried to break out this week, made progress at 5.5%, new all-time highs on the week. Tempus AI, new all-time closing highs, broke through these levels. Extremely volatile. We all like the technology and like what they do. Bounced right off the 8-day moving average. So again, sometimes these stocks, the best they're going to give you is that move to the 80 MA. Once they get strong, the stock definitely looks good. Got above the century mark and backed off on Friday's weakness, but definitely a name we're watching. ABAV, another Toddzilla holding, which has been extremely bountiful for me. Did some offensive selling on that on Thursday, but still holding a trailer position, as this is extremely strong in the drone area. CLS still trading tight here, building a base. You can see it did break below the 21 EMA, but reclaimed it and trading above and right on that 80 EMA right now. Core Scientific, that's another blockchain AI play, broke out this week, up 3.93%, and currently profitable and in the pivot zone. Celsius Holdings was up 3.4% on the week. Again, we talked about this several times, how it did hold the 65-day exponential, which I'm not showing, but closed right on the 80 MA. And this is a stock that has that triple-digit earnings and sales growth ahead with the Alani acquisition. Snowflake, relative strength made new highs this week, up 3.01%. Don owns this in GROTECTION. and closed into new high territory on Friday, but backed off and closed on the ADMA. So, yeah, as long as they're on that ADMA looking healthy, I'm sorry, it didn't, that's not a new all-time high, but it's pushing up against these 2024 spring highs now. Nano nuclear reversed pretty hard on the week. Sienna, which has been on a tear, was up another 2.9%, but extremely extended. CCJ relative strength making new highs up 2.9%. This is a Todd's, in some Toddsville portfolios that reversed out. Not a bearish engulfing, but closed above the ADMA and held up relatively well on Friday. WGS had a pretty decent week, up 2.9%. This is in the testing area, and had a pretty good day on Thursday, but backed off. This is really trading above these highs from the spring and the early winter, or in the winter, and good above the line, bad below the line is the way I look at that. Carmen, new IPO up 2.9%. Pure Storage, high tight flag type formation up 2.87% on the week. A-Lab, after bouncing off the 10-week moving average last week, closed below the 21-day moving average, potentially basing, definitely somewhat vulnerable to that 50-day break. So we'll watch that play. CoreWeave up 2.7%. TurboTection still holding a pretty nice position of this. Did reverse out on Friday after attempting to break through 150. The market held it back on increasing volume. So again, I like this name. I got stopped out of it this week as I did take some positions here on this double bottom type move here. I just didn't like how it broke below that gap up from the OpenAI day, so I decided to punt it, but it did follow through, and as long as it tightens up here, I'd look to re-enter this name as long as the market's healthy and potentially we get a little bit more oversold or a little deeper correction. We'll see how this hold up. Oracle had a pretty decent week, up 2.38% as it bounced interday through the 21-day moving average, but had this really nice reversal candle on Monday and held up along that 21-day and tried to make a move through 300 again, but backed off on Friday with the market. CEG, looking at this, it's a utility power generator up 2.3%. ALB, a lithium processor, new stage 2 uptrend. I've been kind of watching this stock for years. You can see it was in this major stage 3 downtrend. This was a peak in 2022. So basically 3 years and now potentially breaking as a lot of these miners and, the Trump administration is taking positions in a lot of these lithium producers, rare earth producers. And this had a pretty nice move above this shelf, but reversed out on Friday. Or on the week overall. BWXT up 1.8% as it tried to break out of this cup base, backed off a little bit on Friday. Rhythm Pharmaceuticals trading in a tight base here in the biotech. VSAT, pretty hard move here, relative strength exploding, up 1.7%, still losing money, broke out on Friday and reversed. GEV in this base, I don't show the 65-day moving average, but this stock has really been holding the 65-day moving average. And it's getting pretty tight here. But again, we'll look to see if this can break through this congestion area. So nice. It's 17%, so that doesn't qualify as a flat base, but it's close enough. And it's definitely a name we're watching to add back to. EME with a breakout and reversal up 1.4%. Century Aluminum, same thing. Palantir broke the 21-day moving average, and this has had two breaks now of that 21-day moving average. Still undecisive. Nebius up 1.25%. Another data center name, and reversed from the new all-time highs on Friday. Symbiotic, little reversal, but still up on the week. QBTS, pretty nasty reversal on the week here, but still on the 80 MA. CrowdStrike just setting up in a couple of handle base. Solaris was up 0.76%. This is a natural gas modular power generator, similar to BE, but they're using turbines where BE has fuel cells that broke out and then reversed and closed on the 80 MA. Corning, which is a bellwether, down slightly on the week. Marvell, after trying to break out of this consolidation, ended up down on the week. Data, which is a stock we identified back here as it just had tremendous strength, broke the 8 EMA on a bearish engulfing pattern. Intel, Tadzilla holding down 1.25% on the week after making a new 52-week high on Friday, reversed and closed on the 80 MA. Caterpillar down 1.2%. Pan American Silver down on the week. Kratos Defense, again, that's kind of an exhaustion week there after almost a parabolic spike in a reversal, bearish engulfing pattern on Thursday, followed through to the downside on Friday, approaching the 21-day moving average. Again, very extended. First Solar down 1.8%. DoorDash, after making a new 52-week high, reverse, closed down 1.9%. Interactive Brokers, same thing. PPH, a GROTECTION holding, name we're definitely continuing to like and watch. Broke the 80 MA, but Don got into this very nicely back here. So looking pretty good. AIS down 2.4. Not much to say. Southern Copper reversal. Soundhound still looking okay here. This is a speculative name, still losing money. Lost the 80 MA and definitely some accumulation days in here, which you can see the big volume here. Tried to break out to a new 52-week high, or not a 52-week high, but a new high for this year, but reversed out, closed below that 80 MA. Excuse me. Micron reverse was down 3% on the week. Lost the 80 MA. Tadzilla is still holding a position in this with a 21-day as the stop loss. Here's a name from the past, Luckin Coffee from China. Still closed above the 50-day moving average, even though a lot of Chinese stocks lost that 50-day moving average. But this has 28% growth for fiscal 26. Some strong numbers ahead. If you recall, this was somewhat of a fraudulent situation way back, but obviously resurging again in China. AMAC reversed after breaking out of this tough base. Credo right on that 10-week moving average. This is the second test of that 10-week moving average in this run. And again, looks a little vulnerable here. As they get closer to this 50-day, back here, this was a really nice bounce in the first test. Then you had the second test of the 50-day, and now potentially a third, which, again, probability of the 50-day giving way now is pretty high. IONQ reversed, Bloom Energy reversed, Tesla, we talked about that. Taiwan Semi with earnings out next week. New all-time highs reversed and closed right on the 21-day moving average. OFGO, same thing, right on that 10-week moving average and 50-day moving average after a couple tests. So potentially vulnerable to that 50-day break. Robinhood reversed out, down 6.5%, still holding a trailer position in this with stop loss ultimately with a break of that 21-day moving average right now. Light, completely done with this stock on the break of the 21-day moving average. Yeah, I sold this earlier on this break early in the week as it broke that 21-day moving average. That was my stop on my trailing position. This has been a big winner for me, and I'm completely out of that. SanDisk building this high tight flag, still down 8% on the week. Lam Research, big reversal, down 9% on the week. Clack down, also big. Seagate, extremely extended, down 15%. Again, just watching these to see how they behave, but broke the 21-day moving average this week. Alibaba, Stopped out of this on the break of the 21-day moving average on Friday. Had some offensive sells in here. Turbo and myself definitely both stopped out on that break with the Chinese news. Not much to say there. Shouldn't even be on the list. That's it for the watch list on the week. Again, thank you for watching the weekend review. If you have any questions and would like to contact me, my email is todd@revereasset.com. My Twitter handle is @ToddMichael70. If you'd like to become a client, please give us a call at 855-REAL-WEALTH or 732-5932. Again, appreciate follows on our X, YouTube, as well as our website. You can see all our videos on YouTube. We post them on our Revere handle on X, and we appreciate likes and retweets. Have a great weekend, and we'll look forward to see how the week ahead develops here.